Hello, Melbourne. It's great to be here. My name is Donnelly. Some of you might recognise that as an Irish name. That's because my parents are Irish, which makes me second-generation Irish, or as I like to call it, the worst type, right? Because being second-generation Irish means you don't get the good stuff, like the accent that can get you into any room on earth, yeah? All you get is the chronic mental health problems and drinking habits, yeah? And the reason for that is because Irish people don't make the most natural parents on earth. I don't know if you know this, right? People who aren't Irish think, oh, it must be great having Irish parents. It's not, right? Because of an Irish cultural thing called the crack. Now, the crack is why the Irish are the most popular people on earth, right? Basically, it means the good times. So it's like, it's all about the crack, right? But here's a little insight into what it's like to have parents that are full of the crack, yeah? It is great when you're 18 and want to go for a beer with your dad, yeah? I'll tell you when it's limited, it's when you're 3 and you want to be raised. That's when it causes long-term damaging effects. Basically what I'm saying is I think there's a reason I need to go on stage night after night and get the affirmation of strangers. And my brother is a flat earther. So it's an interesting thing. I became a parent myself last year, and I was actually thinking of naming my daughter an Irish name, but then I thought actually we should probably break the curse, right? And the reason actually we didn't pick an Irish name is because, I don't know if you know this, Irish names don't mean nice things. Do you know when you meet somebody from like the Middle East and they've got this beautiful sounding name, and you're like, what does that mean? They're like, oh, it means a breeze passing through a dune. And you're like, oh, that's so lovely. Irish names don't have that, right? We looked in a book of Irish names, and I was quite drawn to one, which you're going to laugh at, which is fine, we didn't pick it, right? I've always been quite fond of old people names for kids. It's quite a modern hipster thing, isn't it? You meet a friend who's just had a kid, who's like, and then it's a little baby, and you're like, oh, what's their name? And they're like, this is Vera. Oh, how old's Vera? And they're like, she's 90. It's a fun thing, isn't it, right? So I was drawn towards the Irish name Doreen. Yeah, it's fine. We didn't go for it. But the reason we didn't go for it is because Doreen in Irish, as this book told me, doesn't mean like, Jesus, a wind coming off the Atlantic and passing through the Connemara Hills. Right? In Irish, Doreen means moody. Now, which is the most Irish thing I've ever seen. Just, you're going to criticise your kids for their whole life. You might as well put it on their fucking birth certificate. They're not that bad. My dad's actually a very quiet man. He's like, my mum's the wild one. My dad is actually the most quiet man. I'm sure if you've got an old dad, some of them are often like that generationally, where they just don't even speak. And my dad is like an iguana, who basically just sits in the corner of the house, moves his eyes once every financial quarter so we know he's alive. But I genuinely did get some benefits from them, The drinking thing is a real thing. Like, I used to be incredible at drinking. I thought that would last forever, and then I got to sort of mid-30s and it just went out the window. Mate. It's absolutely brutal when you lose your skills. Like, I find it now hilarious when you speak to like 20-year-olds who reckon they've had a hangover and they tell you about it and you're like, that was not a hangover. You know what I mean? You sort of say to them, oh, what happened? Like, oh man, I was so shit-faced, honestly. I had 3 hours sleep. Never thought I was going to get over it. And you're like, what happened next? And they go, well, I had like a sort of Coke Zero and I was fine. You're like, where was the hangover, mate? When you get to your late 30s, it is biblical. Because it's not, you can still do the first bit, which is putting it in your body, but the aftermath is catastrophic, right? I learnt it in such a brutal way about 3 years ago. I was 36 at the time when I got my first late 30s hangover. It was on a stag do, which is what we call bucks parties in the UK and Ireland, yeah? And they're very different culturally. I think Australian bucks parties tend to be a night out or a weekend in a nearby city by the nature of your geography, right? In the UK and Ireland, in the last 15 years, something's shifted where rather than do something like that, they've become 7-day team building exercises on the outer regions of Europe, yeah? So your friend's getting married, and for some reason you've got to go paintballing in Latvia. Makes no sense. And you've got to drink the whole time, and you always have to meet at an airport at an absolutely ungodly hour, right? So I went on one. My friend Kai got married, and he called me up, and he was like, I'm getting married. Do you want to come on a stag do? And I went, well, I need some information before I agree to anything. I said, what's the deal? And he went, 7 days in Spain. And I was like, it's not a stag do, is it, mate? 7 days. Some people would call that going travelling. So I said, no, thank you very much. And then he taught me in to go for 2 days. I thought, all right, I'll go for 2 days. He's a mate. Let's do that, yeah? And we had to meet at an airport at 6:30 a.m. And you have to drink instantly, otherwise you get a nickname, right? So you get there. And the reason you have to drink all the time, by the way, is because there's always one person on the whole event who sort of drives it. And it's basically a married father of 3 who's in his mid-40s, and he needs it. Don't take it away from me. So you get to the airport exhausted at 6:30 a.m. like, oh my God, I had to get up at 2:30 for this shit. And he's been there since 1 a.m. because he lied to his wife about the flight time so we could get some extra beers in, yeah? So you walk in knackered. And you're like, and he's like, right, should we get on the beers? And you're like, well, technically, we should get on the orange juice for 12 more hours, but I know the deal. So you start drinking. And I started drinking in the airport, and for some reason, I just pulled one out the bag. Old school. I'd not done it in years, right? I drank for 32 hours straight. Amazing. Yeah, thank you. I will say, I was very proud of myself, but the last hour was actually quite bleak. I was on my own. Everyone else had tapped out. The last hour, I was just sitting on a sun lounge on my own, just going, still got it. And then I passed out, right? And then I got woken up 3.5 hours later, very aggressively, by somebody shaking me violently, going, Carl! And I thought, what's that? I thought there was a fire. I wake up like, what? And then they said to me very calmly, get yourself up, mate, we're going out again. And I heard that information, and I unlocked the late 30s hangover, yeah, because I didn't vomit. I didn't do any of that old-fashioned, stereotypical hangover stuff, right? I heard that we were going out drinking again, and I just went, okay, yep, yes. Can you give me 1 minute, please? I just need to sort myself out. And they went, okay. And I got up, and I went into a toilet, and I locked the door, and I cried. Because I was so sad, man. I was so sad at what they just told me. And it turns out hangovers in your late 30s, it's not the vomiting and the sort of shaking and the sweating. You basically just run out of serotonin. But that is a hangover, mate, not your 20-year-old Coke Zero wankers. You guys have been really lovely to talk to. Well done. You don't need a review. I've been Donnelly. Take it easy. Cheers.